Welcome to the Stetzer ChurchLeaders Podcast, where we're helping Christian leaders navigate and lead through the cultural issues of our day. My name's Daniel Yang, the director of the Church Multiplication Institute, and today we're talking with Dr. Tim Elmore. Tim is founder and CEO of Growing Leaders and a world-renowned expert on leadership, as well as Gen Y and Gen Z. He equips executives, educators, youth workers, coaches, and more to impart practical life and leadership skills to young adults. His latest book is A New Kind of Diversity, Making the Different Generations on Your Team a Competitive Advantage. You can learn more about it at newdiversitybook.com. But before we hear from Tim, let's go to Ed Stetzer, editor-in-chief of Outreach Magazine and the executive director of the Wheaton College Billy Graham Center.
Hey, good to see everybody. Let me remind you that, as always, leave a review, a like, and share the podcast. Also, too, I want to remind you, you can check out extended portions of most of our interviews at ChurchLeaders.com/plus. And if you're, again, enjoying our interviews, make sure you leave a review. So we're going to talk about generations today. And so let's just jump in with Tim Elmore. What's the best generation and why is it Generation X? So let's talk about that as well. And what happened? What generation are you, Daniel?
I'm what they call a Zennial,
That's
born in
not a thing.
1979.
It's not a thing.
I think it is.
So Gen X is a thing. And Gen X, like Tales from Accelerated Culture.
Right.
You know, Winona Ryder's back. But
Yeah.
Winona Ryder's like, why we have Generation X. Did you see the movie Reality Bites? No, you
Yeah.
did not.
Well,
Did you see Reality Bites?
I did. I'm a Zennial.
Oh my
I'm an
gosh,
extra
Tim, I'm
millennial.
sorry. We have some generational angst going
Yes,
on
you
here,
do.
so we need
Yes.
your wisdom. So talk to us about. You don't have to tell why Gen X is the best, but talk to us because a lot of people they don't even frame around. I mean, very clearly, everyone knew the Boomers, and
Yep.
Gen X kind of got skipped over, and then we went to Millennials. But why these generational conversations in the newdiversitybook.com for more information? Why these generational conversations? Why do they matter?
I first need to say, I think you need a therapist on the show, not me.
Clearly.
today. I can tell,
Clearly.
I can just tell. All kinds of things are not being said, but
That's
so
true.
loud.
It's true.
Okay, so I think like many of our leaders, church leaders especially, we're so aware of the different generations that are in a church building on a Sunday. For the first time in modern history, as far as I can tell, we have 7 different sociological generations living at the same time, because people are living longer and mamas are still having babies. So there are the senior generation, that's the oldest. That would be my Uncle Gene and Aunt Wanda. They're 99 and 97 years
Wow.
old. And by the way, Uncle Gene's still driving a Winnebago in Southern California.
I love this.
Scares me. It scares me. Yeah.
Goals.
So then there'd be the builder generation. That'd be my mom and dad. Dad just died at 90 in 2020. And so they were called builders because they built so much out of so little. They grew up during the Great Depression, World War II, very frugal, very resourceful, very grateful. My dad said, be grateful you have a job, even when I started the organization I started. And then the baby boomers came along. You mentioned that, but everybody paid attention to the boomers because we were the largest generation up. I'm one of them, up to the point, 76.4 million people born in 18 years. And everybody wanted our eventual dollar, so they paid attention to us. We were going to be consumers. We were large and in charge back in the 50s and 60s. And then Gen X came through. But you guys probably know this. The first title that Gen X was given was not Generation X. We called them X generation because they didn't want to be called anything. So it was the X generation. They were first called baby busters because the first year of their generation's existence was the public introduction of the birth control pill. So instead of a boom, it was a bust. In fact, if you add on top of that Roe v. Wade in 1973, you have a shrinking population, not a booming population. So they were in the shadows of the boomers as they came through. Then you had the millennials or Gen Y following X. They were brought on really by a parenting style shift. We can talk about that later if you want to, but they were the people born in the 80s and 90s, más o menos. And then Gen Z, kids really that have grown up in the 21st century with a smartphone, not just a cell phone. And that was a game changer. And then the youngest generation today are children called the alphas. So we went from Z to alpha. These are the kids that are in elementary school, birth to elementary school. And my gosh, just think about if you're 6 years old today, 1/3 of your life has been during a pandemic with people wearing masks and not showing up. Their interpersonal skills have been slowed down, but I think they're so sharp. They're so good, but they're young and having to come back with their EQ. So anyway, those will be the 7. And let me say one more thing.
Yeah, please.
You, Daniel, are You are
What
a
is that?
tweener.
Millennial?
Zillennial. I'm sorry. Yes. Well, you're what social scientists call a tweener, because if you're 5 years at the tail end of one generation or 5 at the beginning of another, you're going to adopt characteristics of both. Would you find that to be true in your life? Kind of a little bit of
the cartoons I watch are probably similar to some that you've seen.
Cartoons?
Yeah,
You watch cartoons?
Yeah, I'm a
watch
Zennial.
cartoons. I'm an adult. So
that I watched.
That I watched. Oh, I
Yeah.
gotcha. Well, that's true. Bugs Bunny was like when I was
Sure.
a kid, and
Yep.
so that tweener thing is a thing. Okay, so when we talk about generations, the most popular church growth, capital C, capital G,
Yeah.
seminar in history was actually How to Reach the Baby Boomer by a guy named Elmore Townsend.
Yeah.
One of a friend of yours, a mentor, and he said there were 5 B's, and you could define them by bucks, the birth control pill, you mentioned that, by the book, Dr. Spock's Baby and Child Care, by the bomb, this idea that there's this momentary, that everything's going to blow up. And there was another B. What were the 5 B's? And the book, the bomb, bucks. Did I say bucks? And the bucks, the massive increase of income. And I think everybody would agree that, maybe not everybody, but the vast majority of people would agree that, man, you could describe particularly Anglo baby boomers in and around this, and people flocked to the seminar. And then when you got to Gen X, there was almost a backlash to generational theory. And people said, well, you don't need to do that. Emerging Church said that's a wrong path, whatever it may be. And partly because, the boob tube was the other B. So the boob tube was the idea.
That's right.
Like if I would sing, you wouldn't necessarily, maybe you would be old enough. If I were to say, here's a story, Tim would know what to sing. And lots of baby boomers know what to sing. It's just the first line of the Brady Bunch theme. Because there were 3 channels, except one UHF that you had to turn 2 knobs to get to. And it shaped a culture. I guess some people now ask the question, well, not some people. I hear it widely discussed. I ask the question, we are not, some people go down their whole life in the skater culture, and some people go down their whole life watching HGTV. And so how does the fact that the cultures have all shifted, and now there's like 50 channels of television and 50 cultures and subcultures, where the boomers were kind of more monolithic, what does that mean for generational theory and generational divisions?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is the goal should never be to stereotype, but to understand. The whole purpose of the book that I did was to be an encyclopedia to better understand. You and I both know if we meet somebody and we hear their backstory, it helps us a lot to not judge or critique prematurely. So this book is, stereotypes are shortcuts of the mind, and they're not helpful. But I have chapters on each of these generations, and I try to talk about how this is such a big deal. Here's the number one reason, guys, this thing. When our screens went from public to private, things got niched and very pronounced. So Ed, you'll know this. When we were growing up, there was one screen in our house, a television, that everybody watched a show together. Maybe we watched the Brady Bunch together. And then we talked about it, laughed about it, blah, blah, blah. Along the way, we got multiple televisions in our homes, oftentimes. And then we got a phone. We got a computer in the kitchen, and then we got a phone. And now we've all got this portable device where a teenager can have a wholly different life than mom and dad have. They know she has an Instagram account. They don't know she has 4 Finsta accounts, fake Instagram accounts, where she's got personas she's developed that are completely different than the one she is in reality. And I think now that we can live in niches, it's just made it more pronounced. We have echo chambers. You guys get this. You talk about it. I'm just saying we've got to pay attention to better understand our people. And I think this is part, not all, but part of the answer.
Tim, as part of my work, talking with church planting organizations, a lot of them are now turning to trying to understand Gen Z. Some of them are still trying to understand millennials, but millennials are 42 now.
My denomination is still trying to understand Gen X.
That's true. Yeah, that's right. But if we're looking at some of the more recent generational cohorts, Gen Z, Gen F, we may not have enough information just yet, but even Gen X, millennials, what are some of the strengths, weaknesses? I don't know if those are even the right categories, but like, what are the highlights of those generational cohorts?
Again, you walk through this in the book, but walk us through a little bit of the content. Again, it's universitybook.com, but walk us through some of that.
Okay, sure. Well, first, I think it's important for leaders and parents to know that Generation Z is not a continuation of the millennials. We often think, kids today. We've been saying that since Socrates, by the way. Socrates thought kids were disrespectful and lazy and they don't pay attention to their parents. And I thought, did he write that last week? But they are very different in a few ways. They have shifted in their emphasis of their life, one from confidence to caution. So millennials had, many would say, way too much confidence. They thought they would be the vice president by 23 years old, and why wouldn't they? We gave them trophies just for showing up and told them they were awesome for putting the fork in the dishwasher. But Gen Z is much more pragmatic, much more cautious. But they are audacious because this smartphone has made them feel like maybe I don't even need a leader. Seriously. So I would say the two biggest ideas for someone to grasp in this conversation would be high anxiety and high agency. So Gen Z in a job interview, let's say, it would be great for the employer to realize they probably will bring some mental health issues that in past generations we would have balked at and said, hey, suck it up, let's go, come on. In fact, when I started my career, I would say the mantra of most bosses was, leave your personal problems at the door. You come here to get your work done. Today, we say, bring your whole selves to work, do we not? So they're bringing emotions and baggage and this and that. And I don't just mean they, all of us do. So I think we need to look out for what are we doing in the church for mental health issues. Yes, there are deeply spiritual issues for sure, but there are mental health issues that we may need to get help on to really know how to help these kids have peace of mind. We believe, let the peace of God rule in your hearts. But that is very difficult for the average teenager today who has 10,000 messages coming at him or her every day. The other word I'd give is high agency. I think that my generation, Ed, has a very difficult time not telling a Gen Zer, hey, you got to pay your dues, shut up and just get your work done, when they bring so many ideas to the table and we're not ready to listen. The assignment I've given myself this year is speak as if you believe you're right, but listen as if you believe you're wrong. And that has been a game changer. So a quick story before I let you volley back. Tony was a college student at Ohio University just 2 years ago, and he got a part-time job. This would have been just before the pandemic and then throughout the pandemic at a major paint store. You would know the name. And while he was working on this job, he started mixing paint colors after hours, and he got on TikTok and he started posting, mixing blueberries with white paint. And oh my gosh, this is awesome. Well, get this. Tony garners 1.4 million followers on TikTok, 37 million views. Well, he realizes I got something here. So he decides we could monetize this at this paint store. We could do something with this. We could market this. So he puts a slide deck together and he takes it to management, and he doesn't get one person, one executive interested in his slide deck. Doesn't get one set of eyes to even look at the slide deck. Tony does get something he didn't expect. He got fired.
No.
They let him go because they thought he must be doing this on company time. He must be disruptive to the customers. He's probably stealing the paint. Isn't that a stereotype right there? And so get this, Tony leaves. He's been let go, goes down to Florida. He's now got 2 million followers, and he started his own paint store. I would say that retailer just lost a great opportunity because they didn't see what a 20-year-old saw. I think it's happening in the church all the time. And we will not let go of our power. Bless God. And so I'm just saying we have got to figure this out, or we may not thrive for sure. We may not survive if we don't do it right. So I'll stop there.
Didn't see what a 20-year-old saw. I like that language. And, again, I have 3 daughters around that age, like on both sides of that age. And I will tell you, it is your scripture's right on, that high anxiety, high agency, at least, my experience, recognizing that we all recognize that, people are different individuals. But even here at Wheaton College, just these students, they just have a different way of thinking. And certainly then I think about my boomer parents who very much were, you pay your dues, union, iron, lather, the whole 9 yards. The generation gap seems to be big. And I think of the difference between my dad and me, boomer, Gen Xer, and there was a generation gap there. but it seems like it's a chasm now. So tell us what you observed about the gap, and you actually propose that it's growing. So
Yeah,
why?
yeah.
What's it like, and why is it growing?
Well, I think social media has hindered the collaboration and added to the conflict. You remember a few years ago, guys, where we began to see hashtags on social media, how to confuse a millennial? And we were all making
Yes.
fun of those dumb
Yep.
young people that, and we're basically gaslighting them all the time. Bless their hearts.
Yeah,
No wonder
Daniel participated in that. I didn't participate in that. So I did not. I never make fun of millennials.
But you read about it, didn't you, Ed?
I did.
That's
I
right.
read about it in a book.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then the millennials struck back with "Okay Boomer," hashtag "Okay Boomer." They were making fun of those boomers. In fact, they really got in poor taste. In my opinion, they had this hashtag "Boomer Remover" talking about the COVID-19 thing. Oh my gosh,
Oh
it's
no,
horrible.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Gen X started making fun of, Gen Z started making fun of Gen X with hashtag "Okay Karen." You remember this? So Karen is that fictitious woman that's always asking for the manager in the restaurant and
with that hair. Yeah.
That's right. Disturbing the high school principal. So it's gotten bigger because we can find our little niche. In fact, in the book, I even talk about we got to do this exercise, ditch the niche. We've got to get out of our echo chambers and find someone that's 22 if we're 52, or someone that's 52 if we're 22, and say, let's get a latte and let's swap stories, find common ground, and then learn from each other. Ask each other what your superpowers are. That would be a game changer. My favorite relationship here at my office is Andrew. He's 30 years younger than me. We always learn from each other every time we meet. It's so much fun. So anyway, that's why I think it's getting bigger and bigger. It's the smart technology that we have that allows us to live in our own little world. Yeah.
And it's not just social media, right? It happens on ministry teams. From your perspective, what do you see are the misunderstandings that are happening on teams that are probably because of generational gaps, the way that they misconceive their generations?
It's a great question. Where do we begin? The one thing I often tell employers is right up front, after you've hired this young person, communication norms. So communication is different. As you know, the millennial, I don't mean to make fun. Let's just say the young professional might quit their job on a text message, rather than have a face-to-face conversation, which are much less comfortable. I'll just send a text. Or they ghost their employer. They will just, it's quiet quitting. They'll just leave. Oh my gosh, they're gone, So I think we need to communicate norms of communication. So we just say, I know you prefer that and TikTok and this and that, but this is how we all get together on the same page here. And then I think we also need to communicate the norms of decision-making. We've had young team members think that if they were in a meeting, they not only got to weigh in, they got decision-making rights. And we said, no, this is not a democracy here, but they wouldn't know. They've never had a full-time job before, maybe. And it's not a cut down. Mom said focus on academics or hockey or soccer, so they did. So I would think, Daniel, those would be two big ones that we need to do that are just huge. But can I just offer one more? And I know you guys buy into this even before I say it. We've got to begin with belief. I think because we don't know someone well or a generation well, our amygdala kicks in, the fight or flight, and we not only stereotype, but we put a wall up instead of a bridge. Can I say that again? We put a wall up instead of a bridge, and it's just too much work. That young buck there, that blah, 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 and we even have, and then we have our water cooler conversations, whatever that means where you are, but, we have our echo chamber. But I just feel like it's gotten wider because we will not do the work. So here's my metaphor, listeners. When we fly to another country on ministry trip or pleasure, whatever, we automatically psych ourselves up when we get off the plane to work harder because we're now in Asia or Europe or wherever, and they have different customs. They may speak a different language. They might have different values. Bingo. This is what I find. I talk to Gen Zer. I have to do the work of a cross-cultural relationship because they have different language, different customs, and different values. And the moment I'm psyching myself to work at it, I can do it. So I think that's just a simple word of advice, but I think we need to heed it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to press into something because I think you see tokenism happen with women and minorities, people of color. You'll get somebody who's saying, "Hey, this is my uh, minority hire," or something like that. And
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
occasion, I'll hear people talk about the young people on their team almost in a tokenized way and very condescending.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how can
Yeah.
leaders like meaningfully integrate the next generation onto their team without having that condescending attitude, saying, here's my young guy or something like that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. My recommendation would be to do something that Jack Welch introduced way back in the 1990s. Remember Jack Welch, CEO of General Electric?
Mhm.
He started something called reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring. And it's a concept that maybe listeners you've heard of, but basically in the 1990s, when computers were somewhat new in the workplace, he had these 59-year-old executives that said, I got a pad of paper and a pen, I'm fine. But he had these MIT grads coming onto the team that were totally comfortable with that computer. And so reverse mentoring was putting together maybe a 60-year-old with a 22-year-old, and both swapped stories. So they found the common ground. And then each of them made deposits in the other on where they were strong. The old person, can I say old person here? The old person said, here's how to win at this company. I can tell you right now, I've been here 40 years. But the younger person saying, here's how you can maneuver that that icon on your laptop and blah, 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 blah. And it just turned out to be a huge win. So what if churches did this? What if they had reverse mentoring groups? And we even gave them some questions to start with. We don't need to overprogram, but just enough to get them started. This could be a game changer. And by the way, doesn't the Psalms tell us from generation to generation? David wrote about this. One generation shall pass us on. Well, we're not doing it well. Can I just give my opinion on this? You can edit this from the recording if you want. We, the older generation, will not let go of power very, very easily. Everywhere I go in the world, I see, and I won't even mention the countries, but I'm telling you, we will not let go. And the young generation is going, well, I'll just leave or I'll just start my own. When they don't have to, if we let 4 or 5 generations all flourish together. So one more thought, I just had this. We will let our team members that are young visit our leadership team meeting just to get a feel, get their sea legs, visiting and listening in. Oh, wow. Ooh, I didn't know you talked about, oh, I see why you made that decision. But then we'll say, hey, tell us, Cam, what do you think about that? It's just a win-win. So there's no reason why we can't do this, but we got to break out of the, I don't know, paradigm that we've held on to for decades right now, I think.
Yeah, it is. I think there is a certain paradigm, certain expectation that's actually there, and part of what I'm trying to figure out is I talk to a lot of I don't know, maybe middle aged or even somewhat younger church leaders, and they have what I would say is a negative perception of younger generations. And as you said, that's been since Socrates. And I remember, with my generation, Gen X. I mean, the early tales about Gen X were slackers. I mean, it was, I mentioned the movie Reality Bites and Ethan Hawke and Winona Ryder, and there were these slackers that didn't want to have jobs. And, and that, and then the .com boom comes, and that's still my generation. So, and become, they're working all these hard, Silicon Valley. And then the bust, and it goes on and on. So people sometimes have negative perceptions of a generation. And so how do you answer to that, maybe that 40-year-old pastor, it might be a lot of our audience, that pastor, church leader, staff member who says, you know what, all I know is I look at these newly minted college graduates. And again, I'm not saying this is the case. I literally work at a college. They're entitled, they don't want to work hard. And like you said, they want to basically be the CEO and be a part of every decision. For example, you said, bring them into the room, but you didn't say and you said even ask some questions, but they have this negative perception rooted in sometimes their experience and interactions. So how do we help them walk through that? They're all listening. How do we walk through that?
Well, it's going to have to be a decision that we stay with. Like a good marriage, great relationships will take time. It's a crock pot, not a microwave. I would say one item that's really helped me is if I care about the future, I've got to care about these things. I don't care if I don't like them. I've got to pay attention because, ready or not, by the year 2030, 75% of the workforce will be Gen Z and millennials. 3 out of 4. And we'll be in wheelchairs, fellas, going, I hope these young workers that work here take care of us. Well, they will if we take care of them now. I know this sounds cheesy and poetic, but first of all, my argument, if you care about the future, you get up off your butt and you do the work you've got to do to understand them. So understanding is first, and that means we listen. In fact, I always say the leg we have to stand on, LEG, is this. I need to listen. That makes them feel heard. I need to empathize. That makes them feel understood. Then I've earned the right to guide them, and I can offer guidance. Quick story. I was with our youngest team member at Growing Leaders, my organization. He just graduated from the University of Michigan, smart young man. I love him. He was coming in kind of hot, very confident, little overconfident. And I noticed that, and I thought, I'm glad he's confident. I don't think he realizes how he's coming across to others. I would have him get up and speak at some of the events I was doing, and it was just confidence. So we had a meal at a restaurant, and I said, Cam, I'm really loving how confident you are. I said, do you remember the paradoxes we talked about last week? And one of the paradoxes we had talked about was great leaders are both confident and humble. It's not one or the other, it's both and. I said, I don't know if you know this, but you are coming across with no humility at all. He said, well, I am humble. I said, I know, and you're proud of it. No, I'm just kidding. But I said, you are humble. But I said, you didn't come across that way. So he pushed back. He was a Gen Z. He pushed back. And I finally said, all I can say is if you want to move ahead, do you want to move ahead? Oh, yeah, I do. Okay, then you've got to add this to the mix. Well, I've been so proud of him the last few weeks since that dinner. It's been so rich to watch him intentionally work on it. But see, the argument wasn't do what I say or else. It was, I know how you want to come across, and I know where you want to go. I'm going to help you get there. Here's a way. So maybe that's just good behavioral science, but I think that's what we're going to have to do. Listen, empathize, and then guide. Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like part of that is like curbing your expectations too, whenever you do come together at the table. And a lot of the millennials and Gen Zers that are looking for work right now, for instance, one of the big things that they're looking for is I got to be hybrid, or at least the ability to work from home. And that's just a given to them. But for previous generations, it's not that obvious. Can you talk about how expectations play out generationally?
Yeah, absolutely. I have this theory I learned from Sam Chan. Here it is.
Sam.
Conflict. Yeah. Conflict expands based on the distance between expectations and reality. That's so good, isn't it? Conflict expands based on the distance between expectation and reality. So a quick, listeners, if you're trying to figure that out, if I told my wife I'm going to be home at 7 o'clock for dinner and I get home at 7:05, no big deal. If I get home at 9, we're going to have a conversation. And it's not that she can't live without me for 2 hours. It's because the expectation created the conflict. So I feel like every generation comes in with a set of expectations, often drawn from culture, not always. It's some parents and some this, that, and the other, but this is part of the equation. The more I understand their expectations, and then watch this, I have a whole chapter on this in the book. I have a chapter on preferences, expectations, and demands. Would you not agree? Those are 3 different things. You may prefer that communication take place on text messages, but if that's a demand, you better tell me right now, because I'm going to show you another job. I'm going to help you find the door, that sort of thing. So expectations aren't bad. We need to understand them. Preferences are great to know. We may be able to acquiesce from time to time. Demands, oh my goodness, we're going to need to figure that one out. So I know I'm monopolizing this conversation. Please forgive me. I have a story that is such a great illustration of this. Maggie and Antonio. So Maggie was the hiring manager at a quick service restaurant. Antonio was a young man, Gen Zer, who interviewed, and he seemed to be a really good worker, had a little bit of experience. So Maggie hired him. Maggie had gone over some of the policies of this fast food restaurant, one of which is no tattoos. Now, it's not a big deal, but for this brand, they just said, we think that's off-putting to some of our older customers. Let's just not have tattoos. Well, Antonio had a tattoo, but he had it covered up at the interview and didn't mention it. So a few weeks into the job, Maggie's on the shift as the manager, sees the big tattoo on the arm. And you can imagine she is not happy because, number one, this goes against our policy. Number two, why weren't you honest with me? So she calls him into the back office after the shift, and they have a come to Jesus meeting that was not pretty. She asks about that tattoo. He immediately, as many Gen Zers would, not all, but many, believes she's attacking his very identity. This piercing and this tattoo is part of my identity. You are attacking my identity. No, I'm not. I'm really not. I'm saying we have a value here. Why didn't you bring it up in the interview? Well, you're attacking me and I can't believe this. And I have a different set of values and yet I'm a good worker. Am I not a good worker? So he's diverting. 3 meetings like this that go nowhere. But I'm so proud of how Maggie led this way. She's an Xer, by the way. Maggie sat down with him one last time and said, Antonio, I love having you as a team member. You're a great worker. I don't want to lose you. But everybody else, they see that tattoo. And if we just let that go, they're going to go, great, nothing matters here. And so we need to stand in front of this team together in unity. And we need to say, we both made a mistake and we need to share. I should have pressed more or, whatever. And actually, I think it was more Antonio's mistake, but Maggie took some of the blame. She took some of the hit, but he says, hey, team members, I'm so sorry. I wasn't honest about this. I know we have a policy. Some of you may want to get a tat yourself, but here I am. But he said, I'm going to wear a long sleeve shirt. Maggie's going to let me stay. I appreciate your forgiveness. Let's do that. Well, they cheered. They cheered at this way to meet in the middle and find an answer. And here's what I love about Maggie. She calls corporate and says, could we rethink our policy maybe on tattoos? Yeah, which is great. She's not demanding. She's just saying, I think we're giving up some team members if we don't do this. So sometimes we just need stories like that. And in the book, I just try to tell lots of stories of here's how you might do it if you're in a quandary with, 4 generations together trying to collaborate instead of collide.
Well, I think the stories are really part of the strength of what you're communicating because you've got real life examples and more. And the tattoo example, as someone who has a finger tattw, I don't think it would work for me because I couldn't wear long sleeves. But I get what you're saying.
Gloves.
There you go, gloves. I wear gloves. So again, too, again, we mentioned the book. It's a new kind of diversity. And you can go to newdiversitybook.com. There's actually resources there you can download as well, and some bonus content. So I think in terms of church context, right? So how would you advise church leaders to evaluate their generational assumptions? And just ask the question, because again, the subtitle of the book is Making Different Generations on Your Team a Competitive Advantage. So how does that pastor, staff member, church leader evaluate their generational assumptions to see where they're holding back their teams?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question, Ed. The first thing that raced through my mind was we've got to stop the stereotyping. We got to catch ourselves in it. So have we all heard these phrases before? All baby boomers are stubborn. All Gen Xers are skeptical. All millennials are narcissistic. And all Gen Zers are fragile snowflakes. We have heard these, have we not? Those are all stereotypes, shortcuts of the mind. I think we need to be asking ourselves, what do they bring to the table that we don't yet have? So I made this list myself for our team. We have 4 generations here. Baby boomers bring stories and life experiences. And here's what to do when it goes down, because I've been here 40 years. Here's some life coaching I could offer. Tremendous. Gen X offers contrarian thinking. They're not just going to go along. Don't tell me life is wonderful. Life is hard. And, so they bring, let me bring some contrarian thinking, some different perspective. A little bit of skepticism, but I think it's often just enough that we don't do something too idealistic that's just stupid. Millennials bring confidence and hope and energy. They still do, even though they're nearing midlife. And then Gen Z. I don't know if you guys know this. 72% of public high school students, 72% plan to be an entrepreneur. Now, they're not all going to do it, but that's the mindset. They'd rather start something than join something. So we need to create church ministry where it feels like a gig economy. It feels like you could start something here, start something there. And they've got great ideas and they know social media better than we do. So we got to create a place where it's not just doing same old, because this worked for Aunt Minnie back in 1999. And we let them have a place. But again, this is going to be really new because we are so holding on to the power, and it's going to be us saying, because I care about the future, I'm going to let go a little bit and let things happen a little differently than they would. I don't know if that's sufficient for the question, but that's where I would start, I think.
No, that's really helpful. I think our listeners, especially those who are pastors, are probably asking themselves, why should I differentiate between generational cohorts? And you've helped with that. And as we maybe land our time, can you help them think through, like, what's the practical next step to bring this into their staff? Do they start talking about the generational cohorts?
Yeah.
They start the reverse mentoring. What do you think is a good next step?
Yeah, Dano, that's a great question. I do think it's start by talking about it. Most of the time, at least in the local church, we need to talk and get used to a new idea before we take any action, form a committee, whatever. So talk. If the book's helpful, use it. By the way, we have a free assessment at that newdiversitybook.com where you can just check your generational fluency. How well are you with Gen Z, with boomers, with Xers? So that could be fun. So take the assessment, start the discussion. I would love churches to start the ditch the niche exercise where you just find another person from a different generation, grab a Starbucks and just begin to say, what's your superpower? Then on the staff, especially if your staff is made up of maybe 2 or 3 or 4 generations, get the younger ones with the older ones and do the reverse mentoring step. It's been revolutionary for us at Growing Leaders. It's just been great. I learn every single time I meet with Andrew. And I think he would say the same thing. So biblically speaking, the church is made up of multiple generations. I mean, this is not a new idea. I just think it's harder now than it ever has been. And I don't know that we are willing to put the emotional intelligence to work to do what we need to do. We are chronocentric, meaning we get stuck in our own generation. The ageism exists, meaning we start thinking, well, I won't go into it, but ageism exists. We tend to think that older people have the answer, younger people don't know anything, and it's just not true. I think they have so much to add, especially now, that skill sets, the shelf life is shorter on skill sets. 1940s, your skill set worked for 10 years, didn't change much. Today, it's changing all the time. We better let the young people speak into this process.
You've been listening to the voice of Dr. Tim Elmore. Be sure to check out his new book, A New Kind of Diversity, Making the Different Generations on Your Team a Competitive Advantage. You can find it at newdiversitybook.com, where you can also receive bonus content from Tim. You can also learn more about Tim at growingleaders.com and timelmore.com. Thanks for listening to the Stetzer Church Leaders Podcast. You can find more interviews as well as other great content from ministry leaders at ChurchLeaders.com/podcast. And again, if you found our conversation today helpful, we'd love for you to take a few moments to leave us a review that help other ministry leaders find us and benefit from our content. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.